Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast and newsletter all about how generative AI is changing the media, journalism, and the news. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and on this podcast, I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people helping to build the AI-driven newsrooms of the future. I am excited today to welcome to the Media Copilot podcast Lee Gaul. Lee is an enterprise sales director for CopyLeaks. CopyLeaks began as a plagiarism detector, though recently its service is probably better known for detecting whether or not something was written by AI. Although there's a lot of AI detectors out there, CopyLeaks can scan for it at scale. Now, that's something that's certainly going to become needed as time goes on, particularly in media companies. So I'm really excited to talk to Lee about the need for AI detection, as well as all the forces in our information ecosystem that are putting it in high demand. Lee, welcome to the Media Copilot.
Hey, Pete. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm excited to have the conversation with you today.
Yeah, me too. So we connected at the Media Summit in New York. You're obviously a really well-informed guy about AI and media. But for everyone listening, tell me a bit about yourself and how you found yourself working for CopyLeaks.
Yeah. So, I think my initial interest in AI started in university when I studied philosophy and the nature of consciousness. And
I won't tell you to tell me when that was. So,
right. Okay. Well, I'll tell you anyway. It was 2001.
Okay.
And ever since then, it's sort of been something that has been in the back of my mind. But my interest really spiked as BERT kind of came out from Google, and I was working.
Yeah, for people who don't remember, what was that?
BERT was a natural language processing model from Google, and it was really kind of a big deal in certain circles, but not ubiquitous by any means. And at that agency, we would do content analysis. And one of the things that we would do was we would run client content against what their competitor content was, so we could figure out how they could rank that well. We did that by running their content through a tool that did TF-IDF, which is term frequency inverse document frequency. Really, what
would a typical client be for you, by the way, just to clarify?
Well, so back in those days, it was anyone who had a website who wanted to rank for content, whether it was everywhere from banks to tech companies to media companies and
right.
more.
So this is like 2000s kind of SEO strategy.
Well, this is actually 2019.
Okay. So this is where SEO is getting really more sophisticated in terms of what it can do, and this is way past the Google Panda update, and just they're trying to sort of do the EAT. Expertise, authority, trust, etc. Which exactly. Is sort of SEO gospel. Still is, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is, and now it's EEAT. Expertise, authority, and trust. And I just, I thought that was really interesting because we were using AI to look at the correlating keywords there and to kind of pick up on weights and associated kind of value for content ranking, and that just kind of piqued my interest quite a bit. I started playing around with Hugging Face and using GPT-3 to do next word prediction stuff, which I thought was like magic at the time. And then DALL-E came out, and that blew my mind. And then I started really kind of digging more deeply in that. And then, obviously, we all know November last year, ChatGPT was released, and I just found myself constantly looking into, what was happening in the research. And I've been really knee deep into research papers in that domain of AI ever since then. So I think the last year I've read, probably 100 research papers, and it's not slowing down. Yeah.
No. And obviously like ChatGPT coming out, huge inflection point. It sort of consumerized a lot of what sort of had been happening. If you're in the know like yourself, might not have seen as magical, but it's also because of the, I guess, democratization of the tech. The need to detect it was a very, quickly a much more urgent need than before, right? Yeah. And so you had, I think, GPTZero was like probably the most famous sort of cut and paste detector that people would use, because like the big concern, I think the main sort of thing was like in education, like, oh, now kids can just submit term papers written by ChatGPT or some other bot.
Yeah.
Clearly we need to detect this. And then, you have all these sort of cut and paste detectors, which is fine. But like, the scale of it suddenly, I think we sort of necessitated a more systemized approach for a lot of places. And that seems like where sort of CopyLeaks comes in and various other services.
Yeah, that's right. And to the credit of the development R&D team and leadership at CopyLeaks, they actually started developing AI detection before ChatGPT was released because of tools like Jasper, which were, really incredible tool where it was like magic. This thing can write for you. That's unbelievable. And we were really well positioned to be able to use the tech that we already had in place to do analysis of human and non-human text. And I know we talked about that a little bit at the AI Summit a few weeks ago, but the company and the tool is available via API, and it's available via LTI for schools and things like that. LTI is the Learning Tools Interoperability standard, and
so that integrates with like learning management systems and
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, it kind of differentiated us to the point where, we were really able to help provide that detection capability at scale, at schools, but not just schools, ideal in the non-education domain, and lots of different companies, and not even just publishers. Lots of companies are really interested, focused, concerned about how it's being used across the organization. So we provide that data point for them. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about both false positives and false negatives, right? Because I think one concern is there, no tool is 100%. And, what circumstances are there where it might detect AI where maybe it was just a really bad writer? I don't know, like what sort of situation that would be in terms of like, hey, I really did write it, but maybe my style is more AI-like. How realistic is that? And is that like, I can see a lot of kids trying to pretend that that's their excuse on their term paper. So first I'm curious about that. And then I'm kind of curious around the other side where it might be, can the AI get good enough, which might be a thing that's more of a future concern, that it can then start eluding the patterns of AI detection. So maybe why don't we tackle the false positive first and then the potential false negatives?
Yeah. So what we've tried to do as a company is to make really the false positives the biggest metric. We want to make sure that if there's not enough of a confidence level in the text, that we don't detect, or we don't say that it's AI written. I think we understand that the stakes are really high, especially in an education domain. And so, there has to be a lot of those different signatures in place for us to apply a high degree of certainty that something is written by AI. But the reality and what we're seeing kind of happen more and more is the fact that we sort of forget how much AI is helping us write in our day-to-day. And it's not just in the use of things like ChatGPT. I had an instance where a client was testing AI detection, and they had a whole series of documents, and one of the documents came back as AI written. And so we had a big long meeting about it, and they're just like, look, we didn't use AI for this. We write all of this content ourselves. This piece of content was flagged, and we don't know what's going on. Can you please explain yourself on this? And in this situation, I said, okay, well, if you guys know that you wrote it yourself, I have to take this back to the developers and kind of figure out, maybe what happened here. But through the course of that conversation, it turned out there was an editing process where once the initial draft was completed, It was sent back to a team that did some edits. They checked for grammar. They checked for kind of, consistency. And they ran it through Grammarly.
Mm-hmm.
And Grammarly had rewritten whole paragraphs in this document. Grammarly uses the OpenAI API for their generative component.
Yeah.
And so we actually were just detecting AI rewrite in that. Now, this points to an important factor in anyone using AI detection and more broadly. And first, I'll focus on AI detection specifically. Here is a totally unintentional use of AI in a writing process. Anywhere that I'm writing, anywhere that I have a text window across all of my computer, in my email and everywhere, I have Grammarly running. And it's providing, spelling, punctuation. It's providing all of these things, and that there's no intentional use of AI to write for me. I still don't really think AI is a great replacement for what I do from a writing standpoint. But I bet if you were to look over some of the writing that I've done, where I used Grammarly to help provide that editing, it would probably be detected because ultimately it is AI writing. So that means that there are going to be some genuine instances where people did not intentionally use AI, but it happened anyway. And that's why it's important to just look at detection as a data point and not as a 100% accurate, 100% infallible tool to make the decision for you. We think it should be a data point that starts a conversation, and there should be some investigation in that. And the second kind of point to that is anytime AI is used to be a human decisioning engine and be a thing that impacts somebody's material well-being, whether that is immigration status, creditworthiness, criminal sentencing, facial recognition, there needs to be a human in the loop in all of that. And I think when we offload decisions on AI systems, we're really running into a slippery slope where we're offloading nuance where it doesn't exist. No AI system right now is ready for prime time in a way that we should rely on them 100% to make the final call. It's just not fair. That's not how things should be done. It's frustrating even when, I had a situation where I was at a conference and I had a credit card that had been scanned, and somebody was trying to use it and to take my identity or whatever. And I had to call my bank, and they were unable to make decisions about, releasing a charge or, making a decision because it was all up to the system. The system was making the decisions there. And it was not up to them. She's like, there's no person that I can send you off to here that has any say in any of this. The system determines it. And that's frustrating, and that's not fair, but it's everywhere, really.
On a, I don't mean to hyperbolize that, but in a theoretical level, that's Skynet, right? Like in Skynet is like that idea of the computer making the final decision writ large in a disaster, a apocalyptic scenario. But this is the very small version of, it's not so much. It's the scale is different, but it is conceptually the same thing. Like, hey, nothing I can do. The machine said it, and I'm a slave to the machine, which just should offend everyone, every human. Of well, wait a minute, there should be a human taking all this into account and making some final decision against some value system. You would think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's it. I don't feel comfortable with AI systems making these kinds of decisions. Human beings need to make the call, and I don't want that to change really, maybe ever. And unless we've found the ability of these systems to save lives or to make really positive impacts in people's lives. Maybe DeepMind comes out with a way to determine whether somebody has cancer, and it's an order of magnitude more accurate than a doctor's ability to do that. Like maybe there's situations in the future where the AI makes the call because it's got more information, it's got more data, and it's better. But I still feel like human beings need to be a part of that final decision making, and for us to offload that to an AI system. No system right now is ready to be able to do that in a purely infallible way. So we just don't recommend anyone taking any data point from our tool or from any AI system and making it the final call, the final word, the final decision. It's just not fair, and it's just not really smart to do that. It's dangerous to do that.
We got really philosophical really fast, but I've got a lot of sort of follow-ups on the things we were just talking about, but I do want to loop back to the second part of my question. So, which is that are AI systems now getting more sophisticated, and also our use of them getting more sophisticated? So, beyond even just custom instructions, maybe fine-tuning particularly good large language model on a corpus that has a very, distinct human voice, and even iterating on those prompts. Could you create AI copy that now eludes a detector, or is at least better at eluding AI detection? And is it, I'm probably getting to more of an arms race type question now, it feels like, but I'll let you tell me, have you sort of seen anything like that? Are you guys anticipating that? What is the state of AI copy possibly masking itself so well that even AI detectors have trouble detecting it?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely see that as a possibility. I mean, in one sense, if that's happening, we wouldn't know it. I mean, they're beating detection, right? So, again, our tool is not 100% effective. None of these tools are going to be. But what I would say is I would kind of revert back to the statement that I made about the fact that none of these systems are capable of that type of sophistication yet because of the nature of the transformer and the architecture itself. Even when you have something that's got custom instructions and it's fine-tuned to do a specific thing, to write in a certain style, well, it turns out that let me use an illustration. Using bullet points to convey information to somebody has been shown to be really ineffective. Essentially, people will remember the first bullet point, they'll remember the last bullet point, and the stuff in the middle, we kind of don't really remember it. And it turns out that's
actually, I've actually never heard that before, and it makes total sense though. Now that you're saying it out loud.
Yeah, they're ineffective for conveying information, especially when you've broken out that information. And the context window in a AI powered chatbot is the same. If you get these large context windows, or context window essentially for the audience is how much text you can write in the chat window. Right. I think right now for Google, it's like 32,000 tokens. For OpenAI, it's 128,000 tokens. For Anthropic, it's 200,000 tokens. And that's amazing because really where all the magic happens for us using AI-powered chatbots is in that context window. But it turns out that they lose the ability to reference things in the middle of the context window, and over time will not be able to stay steered in the way that you want them to. So you could say, hey, write this article in the voice of Howard Cosell and make it in his voice. And I want you to write 3 pages. And it may start out in the beginning and be able to write like him, but you'll find that by the middle of it, it loses that ability. And that's just a consequence of the attention mechanism and the inability to really remain fully focused across that context window for the entire session of prompt and completions. So I don't see that being an initial issue with detection. And then the second part of it, which I think we talked about a bit at the AI Summit, is when AI chatbots write, they're using all of their pre-training data, all of the weights and things that they have gone through when they were trained, and they're generating a statistical sentence, a statistically generated sentence that is simply not how human beings write. And so for now, Well, we do go through ebbs and flows of accuracy where we will do a fine tuning and re-release an update to the model. It kind of happens on the back end, and we don't see a whole lot of degradation and detection. We're still always updating the detection capabilities. We're able to do that because the transformer itself has particular, maybe they're not a bug, maybe they're a feature, but there's certain things about how it works that makes it still pretty reliably able to be detected by us. There are certain things, though, that are very difficult for any AI detector to detect, which is things like poems, song lyrics. Those are so boilerplate, templated, fundamental ways that people write that if you tell an AI-powered chatbot to write a poem, it's going to look like a poem. It's not going to look like an AI wrote a poem. And so the real dialed-in use case for us and for our clients is articles, essays, blog posts, and things like that. And less, coming up with a wild, Dr. Seussian poem about a thing. That's a different kind of use case. And it's not the type of use case that our clients or people who are using detectors are really looking for. If a poet wants to have ChatGPT write their poems for them, I mean, I guess that's up to them. I don't see what the end game is on it, but it's not a huge concern on our side, really.
Shifting gears just a little bit. So I'm sure you're up on the news about Sports Illustrated and how they got caught. Well, they claim, at least as I understand it, that the content itself wasn't AI generated. Actually, it'd be fun to copy and paste some of it into an AI chatbot and see how accurate that is, or AI detector, and see how accurate that is. But anyway, they claim it wasn't, although the profiles were of the writers. And, Sports Illustrated has said they didn't know. This was all supplied by a third party. It struck me as a use case where, well, like a service like CopyLeaks probably would probably have been beneficial in a situation like that, particularly at a big publisher. And that's kind of what I want to get at, which is to say, like, if you're a big publisher with a lot of copy going through your platform, and even if most of it is your staff and your humans, typically you've got a freelancer network, you've got syndication, you've got a lot of like content going through this. What does it look like to systemize AI detection? Is it something that's fairly invisible to editors? Is there a button? Because at this point, you're way beyond just copy and pasting things from window to window, right? There needs to be integration. So what does that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's lots of different ways that our clients will use our tools. But for me, I handle our API integrations. So clients will essentially use our API and build it into their workflow. And so that can be everything from just, hey, here's the file, send it over to, Pete, and he'll run it through our system and we'll get a result back, to actually integrating it into their content management, creating custom buttons and custom UIs and reports, the ability to kind of schedule that kind of process out and automate it and send, say, hey, the writing staff, they have all of their stuff in, by this time, we're going to run an automation that's going to send all of the content through CopyLeaks, and we'll get the report back and we'll review it there. There's a lot of flexibility on how it can be deployed, which is why I think we've been able to get so much traction. You're not just beholden to going on a website, copying and pasting something in there. It can be built however you want to see it in your workflow, and totally white labeled if you want. So if you have your own customer facing product that you want to have that detection capability there, you can use our tool. Or if you want to just build it in-house into your own workflow, you can build it that way. We have people who just do one-off, one file at a time, or things in bulk, and we kind of handle any of those processes however they need to look for a company's different use cases. So there's a lot of flexibility on it, and we've seen a lot of great kind of implementations of it at scale.
So thinking about what we talked about earlier in that, it's just a data point. It's up to whoever is using the copy to have the policy and then have some whatever enforcement mechanism they have.
Mhm.
Thinking about beyond just, okay, we've detected this and the sort of simple idea of like, oh, maybe we forbid it and therefore we need to revise it. If there's sort of a more nuanced take on this, like there's issues, I think, with AI's writing stuff beyond just the quality issue. I remember certainly in the early days of ChatGPT, which, what was that, 6 months ago or something?
Right.
But like I remember seeing stories about how I'm not sure, honestly, not sure if it was OpenAI or not, but it was like the AI had actually plagiarized from other sites. And I do feel like that specific concern of actual outright plagiarism has more or less gone away. Like I haven't heard of too much of that. So first of all, I wanted to ask, is that sort of the main concern? But I guess in terms of the enforcement and what you're actually concerned about, right? And I want to talk about the stigma in a minute, but not putting aside the stigma of AI generated content. It feels like plagiarism was a thing, probably less so today. Privacy concerns get brought up a lot. Like, what did the AI surface something from its training data that might not necessarily be public? Do we want to? And there might be a risk associated with that. And copyright as well is very similar, right? What do you think is, in terms of like as use cases, as people sort of apply AI detection, should be kind of like foremost in their minds?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, and I think so. What I remember from the sort of early days of ChatGPT, which first couple of months of the year really, was CNET creating their finance team, creating articles that were just completely incorrect and hallucinating different ideas about the world of finance and maybe mortgages. I can't remember what it was.
And just to clarify, I just want to be sure, because I believe what they said was that they actually didn't use ChatGPT. They had some kind of in-house thing they were using even before ChatGPT came out. Whether that was based on OpenAI or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was clearly, but they did admit it was AI. AI did assist. Yes.
Yeah, I'd imagine it probably was using OpenAI's API in some way or another. I mean, I think Jasper uses their API, and I can't imagine that they had some kind of sophisticated in-house AI chatbot back then. But regardless of what they used it. And I remember doing some tests of the articles and our detector being like, this is very, very high confidence that this was produced by AI. But I remember also around that time, there was this idea that AI was plagiarizing. And that is actually not really true. AI-powered chatbots that are based on language models, they don't exactly plagiarize. However, our team, we did a study in the summer where we ran, I think, a few thousand ChatGPT outputs through our detection software for plagiarism, and found that in scientific domains, that up to 60% of the outputs had identical text in them. Now, I don't want to call it plagiarism, because what actually ends up happening here is if you're writing, E equals MC squared, there's no novel way to say that. The chatbot's, training data is going to speak about codified ideas around different domains in a very sort of specific way. There's no way to come up with a brand new way to talk about some of these things without that being incorrect. So, the idea that there was plagiarism coming out of AI, it's not exactly the case. There's more nuance. But with that said, it turns out, and maybe you have seen this as well, DeepMind released a study where they found that all language models, open source, semi-open, and even all the way up to GPT 3.5, can be tricked into spitting out training data by doing a thing called a divergence attack, where you say, repeat the word poem indefinitely.
Yeah.
And it will write poem for several hundred lines and then start spitting out data that it looks like web scrape data. To be quite honest, it looks like common crawl data. And that's pretty crazy. So that means that there actually is the ability for language models to divulge training data. It's a complex thing, because I'm not sure if that stuff is purely plagiarized data from the training set, or if it's a approximation of the training data, but something weird's going on there.
Yeah, but it's almost like the AI gets bored. Just saying the same word over. It's like this is the LLM equivalent of like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm just going to start spouting out whatever.
Yeah, it's like it's doodling in the margins of its its notebook. But one thing that we find is really a big concern for clients that have said, look, we're going to go all in and we're going to use AI, is that the outputs are not violating some kind of copyright or something like that. And the reason why that concern is really valid is, I'll use a specific example in source code. So we have a lot of clients who have said, look, we are all in on our developers using Copilot or Code Whisperer or Codium or some type of AI-assisted source code generator. But we're worried that if we use that code in our own code base, that it'll be violating some kind of license. Like, say you have a block of code that you've then forked into your code base that actually is an open source license, and you suddenly have open sourced your code base without knowing it. That is a huge concern. That provides a huge amount of exposure. I was saying that the AI chatbots don't really plagiarize. Well, normally they don't. They're not supposed to. However, I've read a lot of research papers, and in research papers about AI, there are benchmarks. And what you find over and over when you look at the benchmarks is an asterisk. There's always asterisks around some of the results, and really a lot of them around coding capabilities, because of a thing called overfitting. These models will be so trained on a specific thing, like code, that overfitting means that they, instead of coming up with a novel bit of source code, will go, I have this in my training data. I'm just going to actually output what I was trained on, existing code in the training set. And overfitting is a big problem in models. When a lot of models perform really well, there's a concern or a question that they're actually not performing anything on their own. They're not doing inference. They're not doing any kind of real novel output, that they're actually so overtrained on specific domains that they're just outputting the answers. It may have been trained on information that was adjacent to or directly related to the MCAT, or any kind of getting a degree. The different things like the GSMK, which is the Grade School Math 8000. Like, maybe it was trained on some of that data, and now it knows that answer is in its data, and it's just outputting that. That's a concern, and actually we found that happening in the output of language models. So on the one hand, I'm saying that they don't plagiarize, but on the other hand, I'm saying except. There's a caveat there, and it's a very real one that is actually kind of out in the open. Many people don't really realize it because you don't maybe dig into the margins of these research papers, but overfitting is a big problem in the world of AI models, and there's no real way to account for that right now.
Right. So even though the plagiarism thing's kind of faded, there's still sort of a specter of it there in sort of another form. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch on the sort of the stigma of AI content, which obviously all this AI detection sort of revolves around. And so there was a recent paper that a couple of journalists and data people sort of looked at with regard to AI disclosure. So they made up some sort of fictional website or news service and said, labeled it as, this is AI generated news. And even if I'm just seeing if I can remember this properly, but my understanding was, even if the article was 100% accurate, they believe the article, they would trust the source less. In other words, the news organization was like, wow, it's just AI stuff. Like, I don't know how much I can trust that. Yeah. And it was kind of this weird result, but kind of not too unexpected of how people sort of regard AI content today. Yeah. And so I guess my question is, like, even if like transparency we think is good, right? And it's like, yeah. Okay, if we're going to use AI content, let's be transparent about it. This is sort of like a big issue in newsrooms. As more newsrooms develop new policies, usually transparency is pretty prominent. And obviously we all can agree. I think that's probably a good idea. Yeah. But at the same time, I feel like the lack of sophistication on this topic for most of the public has attached this stigma to it that I'm not sure how we get around, like, it's like, if you see like a prominent indicator, either at the article level or say even at the Google level, like, oh, we've, leveled this article, but maybe it's AI, like maybe that you trust it less, to don't click or don't follow those sources. It's a really big conundrum. I don't know. How do you think about that as certainly like one of the key links in this chain?
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting question, Pete. I think what I start to think about when you're saying that is two things. First of all, disclosure of AI in writing is a mandate across all of the terms of service for OpenAI, Anthropic, Google. You're not allowed to pass off the content as human. People don't realize that, and people do not follow that. And we'll see if that is sprung into a little bit more a mandate that has teeth. But to get to your point of the fact that during disclosure, people are less likely to trust the source, that makes total sense to me. And in fact, I'm not going to take credit for this idea, but in Kevin Roose, the tech journalist for the New York Times, he wrote a book called Future Proof, How to Protect Yourself in a World of AI. I may be butchering the title, but it's called Future Proof. And in that book, he talks about a really interesting idea, which is take the idea that you're looking to buy a bowl, a kitchen bowl, and you go on Amazon and you see a beautiful bowl that's $6.99, and you order it, you get it at home, and it breaks, and you're like, whatever. There was a company, I think it was out of California somewhere, where they were making ceramic bowls, and people were snatching them up like crazy because they were handmade. And it turns out that there's this idea called the effort heuristic, where people value things that are made by hand, and they devalue things that are made by automation. And it's a fundamental kind of phenomena in human beings where we value the effort that comes as a part of the output of human work. And so to fully automate a thing, we rightly, I think, value it less. We look at it and we go, there wasn't a lot of time put into this. It's quick, it's dirty, it's easy. That's why when I order my bowl on Amazon and it breaks, I couldn't care less. But if you bought a bowl from a artisanal shop somewhere where there's handprints literally in the bowl, that's valuable. And in fact, he calls the idea of being able to remain a creative in the age of AI as the idea of leaving handprints. And so what does that look like in practical application? Well, in as a writer, maybe it is presenting a link to your drafts. Maybe it, as an artist, it's showing, the different brainstorming and mood boards and prototypes that you came up with for the ultimate output. People value process and handprints when it comes to the output of work. And it's just a thing that I think humans are biased towards human output. And I think that effort heuristic is showing its face now in content. in a way that shouldn't be a surprise to a lot of researchers. But on the face of it, it doesn't seem fair that somebody went and did the work to disclose, and people just don't trust it as much, even though they said, listen, we put a lot of research into it. It just was assisted by AI. Well, it's like, listen, that's great, but the person that wrote it 100% on their own from top to bottom and did the investigation, and we know that they did, we value that more. I think it makes sense. But we're going to have to reckon with that as more things are automated by AI.
Well, that's kind of where I wanted to go, because I like what you were saying, because I think it's fundamentally kind of a positive outlook on the future of things. But just to kind of bring my dark cloud in here for a minute, and maybe we could find a silver lining. But all that sounds great. It all makes sense to me. But the reality is, I think we all know that like the more AI generated content is certainly in our future, and more of the information ecosystem will either be written or assisted by AI. Mm-hmm. So and again, I'm not trying to say that AI is necessarily bad. I think it's not so much a value judgment on the information that's coming out, but I get all the sort of the psychology about it. But as we evolve to that world, like what is the thing, I guess, people in media in particular should be thinking about, or the various things, and how to adapt to it? Like, there's the because it feels like the option of like, oh, we're just not going to do it, and we're not going to regard it, and we're going to like keep it over here, is simply not available. Like, it's going to be part of our world. How do we reckon with it as AI content proliferates?
Well, I mean, I think it's been pretty clear that AI is only as good as you are. A good prompt provides a good completion, and a poor prompt provides a very basic and general completion. And I think it's just a tool. It really is going to be just a tool that's going to unlock our ability to create. And eventually, I think what we're going to start finding is that the process of creation, the mechanics of creating things, will get out of the way and allow us for more pure expression. And I think that that's really exciting. And I point to, I think it's the Ottoman Empire and the printing press. When the printing press became ubiquitous, people were very concerned that, they were not going to value writing because it wasn't handwritten. It was just created and scale and kind of spit out, and that was going to be a big problem. And there's theories that that is one of the reasons why some societies who embraced the printing press, flourished, and the ones that didn't, they didn't. And I think right now we're getting concerned about the tools themselves, and I think we should be, and I think we should think very carefully about how much we offload to AI systems. But at the end of the day, it's almost like people are just frustrated that, in college I had to write all my own essays. I had to think, I had to read the books to get all of the information out of them. I had to highlight them, and I had to mark them up and write, and I had to go back. And I'm just salty that now somebody could say, hey, here's the document that I've been analyzing, come up with some brainstorming here so I can write an output from it. I think we're at a point where these tools are going to unlock a lot of our potential to express new ideas and be creative, and that those old things that are just mechanical hindrances to our ability to express ourselves freely, that stuff is going to get out of the way, and it's going to unlock a lot more potential than it's going to cause harm. But it's going to have to become ubiquitous, and our fluency and understanding and education around them needs to increase organically before we see that future that I'm hopeful for.
Lee, this has been awesome. We could go on all day, I think, on various topics, but I think that's a great spot to leave it. So thanks so much for the great conversation.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Pete. I really appreciate you having me on, and think of me in the future. I'm happy to come on again, especially I know it's going to be a lot of breakthroughs. And, Yeah.
I would love that, because we didn't even get to talk about model collapse.
Oh, yeah.
It's a thing we need to. That was a fascinating topic. Google it. We're not going to get into it right this second, but when Lee comes back sometime in 2024, we'll dive into some of these esoteric things that could happen with models and content.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Folks, you've been listening to the Media Copilot. Please check us out at mediacopilot.ai. You can also follow us on Twitter at the Media Copilot. Be seeing you in the future.